So yeah, this video, as you can see, is all about well, Dracula and vampires, but mainly around the kind of character of Dracula throughout the ages. You know, it's Halloween, isn't it? So I was going to do one like this. It's not so much round about the fragrance as this, though they are there. But it's just something that, yeah, really interested in. And I started researching this quite a while back, and I found out like an awful lot that I didn't know about the origins and all of that. Now, I'm not going to go into things about where a vampire came from originally. It's obviously dating back to the kind of the Middle Ages, and it's, well, actually there's stuff in the Bible and that, isn't there? But particularly the kind of idea of them we had mainly kind of sprouted up in the Middle Ages because of disease and things like that, and in a funny kind of way, kind of understandable, because maybe some of the people they'd buried weren't already dead. Plus there's things we understand now about how the body can move and things like that, as an ejection of liquids and fluids and all sorts. So it's understandable that they kind of had all these ideas and stuff. And there's a great amount of bodies still being found where they have stakes through their hearts and their heads chopped off and stuff. And I think it is one of the reasons why we nailed down a coffin as well. But yeah, that's kind of where the original kind of idea of the living dead sprouted up. And then Bram Stoker's Dracula, I'll talk about it maybe a little bit more in there, but not really. The one we see on TV obviously has its origins in Vlad the Impaler. Now, Vlad the Impaler has nothing really to do with vampirism at all, but it's kind of something we've kind of taken on board and accepted as a thing, isn't it? But obviously Prince Vlad was a great hero of Europe, a great hero, never mind just like a Romanian national hero. He was not always the most pleasant of people. He'd had quite a complicated bringing up and had actually been through quite a lot, which would explain his kind of methods and stuff. And he understood that the best way to defeat someone a lot of the time was before even having a war or a battle, was fear. So he used quite extreme measures to scare the enemy, or to scare any potential enemies. Anyway, obviously he helped prevent the Turks kind of taking over that part of Europe and stuff. So he's an important figure in history. And obviously Bram Stoker kind of twisted all these things in there with it, and that's kind of, once these stories kind of stick and have been told, then they kind of become kind of lore, if you like, don't they? Folklore and whatnot. But yeah, really, I guess you're kind of mixing old tales from that time and with everything in the film mainly. Again, well, we'll get to the book. Predictably, as I'm filming, obviously the wind has gotten up. But yeah, that's all we need to say for the introduction, really. And it's going to be split into three main parts, the kind of three ages, the three kind of going through it. So yeah, the three ages through kind of modern times, from the first kind of story and idea of Dracula into the most famous, which is Bram Stoker's, into a more modern, actually brilliant version of it. Now, what we'll be missing from this video, obviously, is I'm obviously a great fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which obviously that's kind of my, it's not really about things like that, but obviously that's my big kind of popular culture thing into it. I'm not talking about Twilight, why the hell would what a pile of utter garbage. But they're kind of, that character and that kind of thing has lived through so many things in modern times, and that it's a story that will continue to be told in many different ways, I'm sure. But yes, we'll get into it. So we're going to go back to the beginning, the first story of the kind of modern vampire. Now the first one that was put into a kind of complete story I'll get to is the main beef of this, but I'll talk about the one where it all started, and that is Lord Byron's fragment of a novel, which was written in 1819. Now this started as part of that famous night where Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, and they all kind of challenged themselves to have some sort of competition to write the scariest story, I guess. Now obviously this wasn't completed, but his physician was there with him, John Polidori, and we'll get on to that. But yeah, this fragment of a novel, this was basically there was the main guy, who was Auguste Darvel, who was kind of intriguing, wealthy man, and the narrator who went along on a kind of journey with him. Darvel was a great traveller. He travelled through most of southern Europe, and he seemed to kind of start to waste away after some of this journey, and he basically made him a promise, which obviously this leads on to the other one, and he buried him where there was kind of a crow there. Was it a crow? Stork, or in this certain spot. Now this is kind of relevant because this started off the story. So what his physician did, Byron's physician, is he wrote a story called The Vampire, and this was obviously influenced by that. And this is kind of, if you like, this is the proper story where all this kind of idea of this kind of charming man with a great sexual prowess, hated by some and what have you, came from. And obviously this was based on Byron himself. So the kind of the Dracula character, if you like, from the story is called Lord Ruthven, and he's a mysterious kind of charming man with an unknown kind of feel about him and a dead grey eye apparently. But all the women wanted his attention. They were all kind of pushing their way for him and stuff. And Aubrey, who's based on the narrator, obviously, they go on a trip together. He noticed that Lord Ruthven was generous to the poor, but all the kind of things he gave to people was cursed. They always ended up dead or disgraced, and all the women that Ruthven had been involved with back home all ended up being disgraced and what have you. So yeah, it's kind of a curse there, and he'd be quite picky about who he give the money to. It would be, don't get me wrong, it would be poor people, etc. But yes, he kind of built up a little army, if you like. And yeah, so he was told a story. He leaves him, Aubrey. He leaves him because he falls out with him over Ruthven pursuing somebody's daughter or something. So he goes exploring himself, and he meets a person called Ianthe, I think is how you say it. And he fell in love with her, and she told him stories about, you know, these vampirical monsters and stories of them. And yeah, and it all kind of clicked in his head that most of these stories must have been about Ruthven. Anyway, she was killed with teeth marks there. And anyway, he does presume it's Ruthven, but Ruthven starts to deteriorate again. This is where we come in the kind of similar story. He buried him where he promised, but Ruthven made Aubrey promise he would never reveal that he died, and he would never tell another human soul. So he did promise this. And yeah, so he obviously Ruthven it appears again, and Aubrey's starting to lose his mind, and he realises that it's Ruthven that's marrying his sister, but obviously he's promised not to say anything, and he slowly loses his mind, so nobody would believe him anyway. He starts to get quite bonkers, and ultimately that's kind of a gist of how the story goes, and it ends with Ruthven killing his sister and Aubrey being just kind of absolutely insane. Now obviously this is a fragrance video, and this is the briefest of the stories because it's only a short story. So for Aubrey, I've gone for a lure on from Chanel, and that's because it's relatively classy. It's peachy, resinous, citrus. It's a nice fragrance. It's nothing more than that or less. It's just pleasant and easy, and he's that sort of guy that wouldn't really think or be particularly bothered about the way he smells. And yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. And for Lord Ruthven, I have picked Sweet Redemption from Killian. Now this is the one that's said to be quite similar to Love Don't Be Shy, and yeah, okay, it is. But this it's because of that orange blossom and that, but this is darker, more woody, with some resins, some incense. So it's this very kind of seductive, charming scent that will draw you in and kind of entice you and lay a trap around you, I think. It's the sort of fragrance he would wear. It would be sweet and interesting. I mean, obviously this could refer to Byron as well, couldn't it? That's who the story's about. And it has a charm and a danger and a darkness in there. So I think it's a great choice for them. So yeah, that's the Vampire, or the Vampire, by John Polidori. And this, like I say, is the story that kind of set alight all the stories that we are familiar with. You know, the charming man, the interesting, seductive vampire, and which is more modern, which I'll go into this next, but doesn't so much come from the books. It comes from the TV adaptions and films, etc. But anyway, this is the one that started it, and I learned something I didn't know, is that it was based all around Lord Byron, who's one of my great heroes. And Nicola, the sniff, she was telling me about how people actually thought he was a vampire, the stories of him biting women, etc, etc. But anyway, that's the Vampire. Alright, thanks folks. Now the next part is probably the most famous story we all know, which has definitely shaped our more modern view of Dracula, and it kind of sticks with us. The film, the Bram Stoker's film, is very loosely based on the book. There's a lot of nonsense in the film that has no relation. One of the things I wanted to talk about first, before I even get into it, is the Vlad the Impaler connection. Vlad Dracula. The names are the same, but nowadays in more modern Romanian, apparently Dracul it means devil. It doesn't mean dragon, and this is probably what influenced Bram Stoker more than the kind of, I don't think he'd have known a lot about the kind of history of Vlad the Impaler, who the film kind of focuses around. Now Vlad the Impaler, I need to mention this, it's kind of not in, is because he's very misrepresented in history. He was quite a brutal leader, he had been through a lot, and his impaling was something he got from the Ottomans during his time of being captured and tortured and whatnot, and he'd witnessed it. Now, yes, he was brutal and what have you, but it is very important to remember, not only is he a kind of hero of that area, Wallachia and Romania, he's also a hero for Europe. Without him and without his brutality, which to be fair scared attackers, it maintained law and order, and all of this fear and whatever. I'm a pacifist, obviously I don't believe in doing shit like that, but he ultimately saved Europe from being overrun by the Ottomans, and this is why he should be regarded as a great hero. Yes, he was a monster, but a lot of people in these medieval times were great monsters, but he is a hero. So yeah, that's enough about Vlad the Impaler. Let's get into what this is about. Now, a lot of people don't know that Dracula kind of has a prequel, a very short story that Bram Stoker wrote about being in Munich, where he meets a female vampire who kind of tells him all about the kind of myth and what have you of Dracula, the guy he's going to see. The guy isn't named as Jonathan Harker, but it is him, because obviously in the main story he talks about coming through Munich on his way to see Dracula. But anyway, that's by the by. That's just a little addendum to give you the kind of overview. Now, I'm not going to talk word for word through the entire book. It's more of an overview and what I think is relevant about the kind of myth and the story of Dracula. So obviously it starts with him arriving at the house with these kind of undead people and being warned by people about Dracula and all the things he's done and things like that, and people have good sympathy for him. He doesn't really see why, but when he gets there, there's a deer. Don't know if you could see that. When he gets there, there is Dracula welcomes him to the house with "Welcome to my house." There's no, the famous line, one of these misquoted lines is "Welcome to my castle." So yeah, I thought that was kind of important. And yeah, at some point, he's kind of seduced by 3 of Dracula's brides. He always has 3 apparently. And it's important to say this story is very distinctively told. It's through letters and diary entries and things like that. It isn't like a straight narrative. But yeah, he also notes that Dracula is able to call the wolves and control kind of more malevolent sides of nature. He does some searching around, as you do, and he finds Dracula sleeping in a vault in his earth, in this coffin during the daytime with his eyes open, and it quite kind of scares him. Also, another thing of kind of relevance that's obviously taken from popular culture is Dracula is able to control nature with a raising of his hand, like the Night King in Game of Thrones. Not really the Night's King, but yeah, that kind of lifting up his hand to control nature. So I suspect that kind of influenced that. Then we go back to England, where there's lots of diary entries and chats between Mina and Lucy, who are both kind of important characters. Mina is Jonathan Harker's fiance, and Lucy is her friend, who's involved with one of the important characters in the story. And one of the most interesting things, again, I don't think the film kind of talks about, if you can hear me in this damn wind, is that Renfeld is actually a deeply intelligent guy. He was a philosophy graduate and lecturer, I think, whilst he's in the asylum. So he's a really interesting patient who they spend a lot of time with and that. Lucy and Mina visit Whitby, and yeah, they kind of see the Abbey, which is apparently what influenced this whole thing. It's kind of an ancient kind of is it burnt out, dilapidated Abbey, which I don't know this for a fact, Henry VIII may have destroyed back in his day. Then there's the kind of Dracula goes to Whitby, goes to England, and one of the things he goes there on the ship, the Demeter. There's not a lot about that, but there is a kind of entry from the captain of the horror and the things that go on there, and the fog that follows the ship, which obviously Dracula creates to be able to move about and whatnot. And interestingly, the sister who cares for Jonathan when he reaches the monastery is called Agatha. That's important for the next kind of bit. Basically, as Dracula is in England, he kind of converts Lucy because she's quite, open and wide-eyed, and she, he likes to control and manipulate people. And Professor Abraham, named after obviously the writer, is Bram Stoker. Abraham is called in to kind of investigate what's going on, because they don't really understand what's going on with Lucy. When she's dead, she terrorises London, and she's known as the Bloofer Lady, which means beautiful lady, and she kind of feeds on young children. And the whole of it, you start to notice things. I'm not going to get into this, it's all quite sexist. Weak, feeble woman needs the strong protection of a big man, is one of the things Mina kind of says. Oh, I'm so whatever. Dracula then first kind of visits Mina while she's staying in the asylum for protection, and obviously it's Renfeld, you would imagine, that lets him in and that. Also, if you place a wild rose on a coffin, something you find out while researching about it, it stops that coffin being able to be opened, the box, for some reason. It's just one of them things. Again, that's never really caught on, has it? And also the garlic thing. They make back when Lucy was ill, they make her wear garlic flowers, not garlic. So that's another kind of one of them things that's spun into it. Obviously, I think garlic itself, the smell of it might keep him away, but it is garlic flowers. Also, when he's fleeing back home, there's something else as well, which I'm not sure, I can't remember the film in this much detail. Dracula is not able to pass over water in his own volition, so he has to take the ship, so he can't turn into a bat and fly over the water to get safe. So that's quite interesting. That's why he can't leave the boat or kind of get there on his own. And then as you start to get towards the end of the story, got so much waffle, isn't it? Van Helsing is the one that kills the brides, almost being enticed by their womanly charms or whatever, however it's put. And then Jonathan Harker, who isn't, still in the monastery or whatever, he's part of the whole thing. And Quincy, who dies actually doing this, kill Dracula just before he reaches the castle as the sun's going down. I think Quincy may be the one who cuts his head off, and Jonathan is the one who stakes him in the heart. And that is ultimately a kind of very, very brief overview of kind of important things, I think, in the story that have come out into pop culture more and are kind of interesting and form this kind of modern version we have of Dracula. Him being charming, him being able to turn into different things, the garlic thing, and things like that. There is also, I don't think there's anything really mentioned about him not being able to travel in the daytime. That's something that come much later. And like I think I said in the original story, the vampire, the moon regenerates him. That's why he is awake and alive during the day, because the moonlight regenerates whatever's gone wrong, any injuries, his youth and all of that. There's nothing about the sun. Anyway, this is a fragrance video, I suppose, so I'll stick some fragrances in. Some of the main characters. Now, Jonathan, like I say, is he is quite a tedious kind of, he is a lawyer, he's quite, what's the word, he's quite stupid really, he's quite naive, but he's, you know, he's an honourable English gentleman. No, he's very polite and what have you. And what I've picked for him is Guerlain's vetiver, which makes sense, doesn't it really? It'll be a classy gentleman one, not nondescript. I do really like the fragrance, but it would, you know, it wouldn't turn heads or anything. Just think that bloke smells very elegant. So that's for Jonathan Harker. For Mina, I've gone for Portrait of a Lady for really obvious reasons. To me, like I've always said, that fragrance is like a lone cold rose on a mountain, and because she was quite melancholy, quite out of it, quite head in the clouds and things like that, I think that really suits her. And then obviously the patchouli and that, she did become well, was transporting to a kind of vampire and that. Lucy, I've gone for Love Toxin, which is from Laj, and now this is a very sweet, very dangerous red, full of candied kind of fruits, rose, a little bit of naughty muskiness, and again her as a kind of vampire-esque kind of character as the Bloofer woman. It kind of really suits her, you know, dangerous but alluring and kind of sweet and innocent looking and all of that. Now obviously for Dracula, noir de noir, he is a very charming man. Again, there's no seduction in the sense of the film, but obviously his ability to draw people in and make them kind of comfortable as he feeds on them, and they're not being able to kind of be found or seen almost. And the victims he chooses generally are quite, you know, beautiful women and that, or people he can kind of benefit something from. Another thing that I've not mentioned is that Van Helsing is able to hypnotise Mina, who, because she's connected to Dracula, she can see what he's doing and what he's thinking when she's in that state, because they're so connected. Anyway, that was very long. That's Bram Stoker's Dracula, and like I say, if you think you know the story, you don't really unless you read the book. Yeah, I won't waffle on. Bram Stoker's Dracula. So this the third kind of age or section, if you like, is split into three, and that's the BBC kind of recreation, and that was written by Mark Gatiss, who is very famous for his horrors and disturbing and great things and macabre things, and Stephen Moffat, who's, you know, wrote Doctor Who, and also Mark Gatiss wrote that with him as well. And it's their kind of interpretation of what's his face as what's wrong with me, Bram Stoker's version, but it's split into three very different sections, and I think it would do a disservice to kind of blend them all into one. So obviously the first part starts kind of similar to the main story, and it begins in Hungary in 1897. Oh sorry, it's called The Rules of the Beast, and this is why it's kind of important. But yeah, it starts in 1897 in a convent where Jonathan Harker is after he's kind of escaped from Dracula's castle, and he's eating flies. Now Sister Agatha Van Helsing is the one there who's to kind of get the story out of him, and she's someone, obviously she's Van Helsing in this, who's interested in all these things and has been researching them, and she wants as much kind of information about it from him, and she goes kind of through his account. Now he thinks he's written an account, we'll come to that later, but yeah, she's kind of going through it as how he kind of got there and what happened. And she's also sat with Mina, who's wearing a a nun's outfit, who Jonathan doesn't recognise, which in itself is odd, isn't it? So he goes through the meeting Dracula, and one of the first questions she asks him is, did you have sex with Dracula? Which on the surface seems a bit odd, but again that all makes sense later. And similar to Bram Stoker's, it starts with his journey there and the warnings from the gypsies and them giving him a crucifix and all of that. And also one of Dracula's first wines that is quite noticeable is that he says, because I think Jonathan says, you're not having a drink, and he goes, I do not drink wine. And again that is quite important. And he says he will absorb everything from Jonathan, which again is important actually. And he does start to absorb Jonathan's language, his English, all that sort of things, even his accent. Now obviously we know this is through his drinking his blood. He also says as well many times, blood is lives, not blood is life, and that's not a kind of misspeak with his English or anything, and that's important. And yeah, so Jonathan dreams of sex with Dracula, or does he? There is no one living here is another important line from Dracula, because obviously there are other people there, but he's not lying. He doesn't lie, I suppose, is kind of the point of that. Then Harker, on his kind of searching around, similar to the proper story, finds boxes of the undead, and he awakes Dracula before fleeing his tomb. He also meets one of his brides, and he notices the cross doesn't work on her. It's obviously it's got a lot of Mark Gatiss' humour in it, and so something she kind of says is, you are what you eat. But again, that is that clue, isn't it? That's that kind of thing to the absorbing of the person, isn't it? So he takes Jonathan outside. This is towards the end of the first episode, to describe the sun to him before Jonathan dies. And this is again another one of them things. Obviously Dracula thinks the sun is going to kill him and that. And he thinks, yeah, it's going to burn him to a crisp and what have you. And then he says, death completes you, which again is another kind of thing. What happens next is obviously you go back to the monastery where he's going through it, and he's insisting, I've written all this down. And when you open the manuscript, it's just full of Dracula is master, I love Dracula, I serve Dracula. So he's kind of, obviously he's become one of Dracula's brides, which is Dracula then turns up at the gates of the monastery as a wolf. Obviously Sister Agatha knows who it is, and she kind of, to be fair, she taunts him an awful lot, and she's asking him questions about the stupid strange rules that he has to abide by, and what they mean and why he does them, and what effect they would have if he doesn't. And she kind of, you know, basically calls him impotent and useless if he has to abide by being invited in, or, you know, he's scared of the sun, what does it mean? So she's curious. She obviously taunts him even more by cutting a hand and dripping the blood by the gate. Now what happens with that is, obviously Dracula tastes her blood, and he finds out an awful lot about her, who she is, her motives and everything like that. Then what happens is Jonathan has tried to stake himself. However, it doesn't work if you stake yourself, apparently. You can't commit suicide as a vampire. So Dracula offers to finish the job and end his misery if he invites him in, which he does. Dracula then feeds on all the nuns and feasts away. And what happens is, in the end, Agatha and Mina have taken refuge behind some sacramental wafers, which he thinks he cannot enter through. This is obviously similar again to part of the Bram Stoker thing, and it ends with Dracula, who had taken the skin and the face of Jonathan to woo Mina, and for her to let him in, to invite him into that circle. Now it ends with him about to bite Agatha, and what's her face, he lets Mina go, which is kind of important. So this first, basically in a gist, I'm not going to keep waffling on and make this longer. This first bit is kind of the introduction to the mystery, to the lore, to the rules, to who Dracula is, and the things he lives by and abides by, and all of that. And it takes more so, it's more in depth, if you like, than Bram Stoker's, because it's all about him. It's all about specifically why he does stuff and where some of the rumours and the things come from. And it's a lot more complicated, and there are little clues and whatnot leading on to the later episodes, because the whole series is ultimately about Dracula and who he is, rather than the Bram Stoker's one is kind of, Dracula's not actually in that a lot. He's in the background, isn't he? It's all about destroying him, and the other characters take a lead. Also, that Sister Agatha is mentioned in Bram Stoker's, but obviously she's not Van Helsing. She's just, it makes sense actually to have her as some sort of curious thing, because people would have asked questions in the monastery, you would have imagined. Why do I keep calling it a monastery? Nunnery. So yes, let's now go into the old scenting of them, because again it's a fragrance video, isn't it? Now for Jonathan, in this one, more than in the book, he's such a tediously dull British, personalityless, characterless. He's just like so. Yeah. And what I've decided to give him is from Creed, and that's Viking. Now Viking is, to me, it reminds me a bit of Old Spice and Brute and all of that. It has that kind of classic, very classic fougeriness about it, which I'm not criticising that, by the way. It's a very expensive version of Old Spice, but it's something that, some generally personalityless person would wear, really. Just, easy, classy smelling, not wanting to take a risk or stand out or whatever. And that's why it kind of, I think, suits him with just them classic nods. And he is a classic gentleman, if you like. So that's Jonathan and Creed Viking. Next is Sister Agatha. What a complex, brilliant character she is. Her curiosity, her almost I don't know, she's very anti-religious. There's a lot of jokes made about that. I'm trying to think of one of the lines. Oh yes, that Christianity is a typical loveless marriage, where neither of them believe in each other, respect each other, but she can't leave because it's a roof over her head. And that's a great line, but that's what she is. She's kind of witty, strong, and very, very curious, and very interested in things. And ultimately, she is trying to find God, maybe. Maybe she wants to believe. So anyway, what I've picked for her is Swedoff's Bohemian. Now this is a kind of boozy, big, massive, dark. Well, dark as in it's got a little bit of that depth under it, which she has some darkness under it. I think there's Scipiol and things like that, maybe a touch of oud. But it's ultimately this big bombastic scent. It's a scent that you'll smell from a mile away. And it suits her kind of witty, curious, powerful charm, and her lack of fear, her just supreme confidence. She's not really bothered. You know, if he snaps her neck, oh well, she'll have discovered why this, and this, and that's what motivates her, that lust for knowledge and understanding of greater things, unexplained things. So yeah, Bohemian suits that kind of big personality, I think. So that's Bohemian from Swedoft. And finally, obviously Dracula himself. Now he starts off like the other one. He's old and he gradually gets youth and stuff. But at this stage, he's, you know, it's the Middle Ages and that. And what I've gone for is Figment from Amouage. Now this is a kind of like this, a foresty, dark, moist, squelchy kind of forest. With I describe it as smelling of beaver or badger, or, you know, some sort of moist little thing that would live in a forest by a river, which is down there. But that animalic growl, obviously, you know, he made himself into a wolf and such like, which would have stank in the rain, and that dark muskiness. And also Figment, don't get me wrong, it's so interesting, but it is a dark kind of forest. It is a wet, kind of spooky kind of thing. And at that stage, in the early stage, with all of his mystery, it just suits in particular in this section, in this first part of this one, really well. Obviously I will, you know, send him in the next one and the next one as you learn more about him. But yeah, that's the first part. I know I've waffled on and on and on, and it's not necessarily going through the whole series line by line and word by, but I think it's important to get an idea of what the story's about, and some of the lines particularly, because if you're very interested in this kind of thing, now obviously Dracula's a completely fictional character, but he's someone we're all fascinated about, and I think Mark Gatiss really wants to go in and explain who he is and the mystery and everything, maybe why we're so fascinated by him. Anyway, sorry, that's the BBC's Dracula part. So next is obviously the part 2 of the Dracula things, and now most of this takes place on the Demeter. So it begins with Dracula talking to Agatha over a game of chess, which seems quite odd, but it's kind of, when he bites someone, he takes them to a kind of comforting place, I guess, and he's talking about his trip on the Demeter. The ship is full of a circle of a variety of people. Obviously you do find out kind of hand-picked by Dracula himself for their different interests for him, let's put it. So he starts, kind of, one of the first guests we meet is this old Duchess, who he has dinner with, and he knew her well when she was much younger. Obviously she doesn't click straight away. She says some German to him and he doesn't understand it, so to kind of show off and do that Dracula thing, he goes and bites one of the German crew members, and then comes back and he can speak German, obviously, because he's absorbed that. There is a fog over the ship. This is kind of due to his fear of well, we know his fear of the sunlight, and it kind of covers the ship the whole way in a kind of protective way. And yeah, so one of the passengers, who's called Lord Ruthven, that's a nod to the original story, of course, and he's very into this whole thing as you find out more and more. And Dracula's uses a kind of synonym that he's used to invite all these people on this journey, and it's Balor, which is actually the Romanian name for Dracula. Agatha kind of wiggles all of this out, but she turns out as well to be the mysterious passenger in room number 9. Now the room number 9 thing is a nod to two of Mark Gattis's close friends who are also writers, and they do a TV show called Room Number 9, so that's kind of that nod to that. And yeah, through talking to Dracula and that, she discovers she's in fact the passenger in room number 9. As she's about to be hung as a vampire, because they all have their suspicions, and he kind of sort of pins it on her, not really, but sort of, to kind of get the attention away from him. And she spits blood in his face, which obviously exposes him as who he is. And then they kind of ultimately, by the end of it, they set him on fire and he jumps into the sea. Now obviously, similar to the same story, they don't want to quite let the ship get to land and infest, you know, Whitby and Britain and that. So Agatha decides, as she's dying anyway, to blow up the ship. But Dracula obviously comes back on board, and the captain obviously goes down with his ship, so he's there too, and he kind of nearly kills him, but the captain manages to do it. And what we also discover from his chats with Agatha is he believes the cross is a sign of oppression. So that's where that kind of comes from. In his mind, it's because it, yeah, well, that's ultimately what it represents, isn't it? Christianity, and that it's a sign of living a certain way and doing certain things. So obviously, as the ship sinks, he goes down in it, he jumps into his box and goes down there, and then the episode ends where he's walking on onto the beach, and he sees somebody who looks a lot like Agatha, and obviously it's modern times, a few hundred years have passed. So yeah, that's basically the second episode. It's like a really good one. It's kind of a murder mystery kind of thing, as well, we know who's done it, but you know what I mean, it's like a what's her face, Agatha Christie kind of sort of thing. And it's interesting again to find out all these people he wants their knowledge, and he loses his rag with Ruthven a bit, because obviously he wanted to absorb the doctor, but Ruthven had killed the doctor. Yeah, it's very good, that episode, and it's also a bit more about these myths that obviously we always have about Dracula and all of that. So just because it's, you know, it needs scenting, the captain is who I'm going to, and that's Captain Sokolov, who is important kind of throughout. He's not a big character in it, but obviously it's his ship, isn't it? And he obviously does what he's told by protecting Agatha in that room, and he goes down with his ship, and he's kind of a sort of a brave guy. And what I've gone for him is Lamal. This is a strange one, but it's not only because of his kind of the nod to the sailor kind of thing, but also he's quite modern, he's quite fun, he's quite light really, he's quite a decent guy. And I think Lamal is that kind of fougere thing, but with a friendly touch, isn't it, with the vanillas and the mint and the kind of, it's a lovely friendly modern fougere, and he's kind of a friendly decent captain. So that's Lamal for the captain. For Dracula in this one, I've actually gone for a Killian, and I've gone for Love Don't Be Shy. Now the reason I've gone for that is obviously he's red, but he's quite obviously this is him on a charm offensive. He's very charming and he's very interesting, and he charms and enchants many of the passengers, and he's obviously very likable, and none of them believe for a second that it could be him. Obviously his relationship with the old Duchess, he's charming and quite lovable, like the fragrance is, and obviously we know Love Don't Be Shy, that big orange blossom, little bits of woods and that. Also it's got the fluffy marshmallow, and he is quite likeable and fluffy till obviously he's discovered, and then yeah, he's back to Dracula. But I think that's a good one for him. Yeah, for Agatha in this one, I've had to think deep, because in some ways, although she's rotting away and you know, deteriorating, and she, in the end she knows she's dying, she's also found some peace with it all, and her kind of understanding of the cross, although she doesn't believe that's what it is about it. Maybe we'll find out more about that. But anyway, I've gone for Nancy Mayland and Eglantia. This is because obviously it's them two C's existing harmoniously together but never mixing, and that in a way describes her relationship with Dracula, that they are two people who have a great understanding and intrigue by each other, but they never really blend yet. They never really kind of blend, and she finds a great peace in that she's starting to understand him and everything. And now this fragrance is kind of, it's woods, there's a little bit of neroli in there, it's also got some warm resins, and it's the kind of, all the mix of these things you think don't really go working together. It's such an intriguing scent. I think it perfectly represents Agatha, how intriguing, how interested in Dracula she is. So I'm not going to waffle on. That's Nancy Mayland's Eglantia for Agatha in this episode. So part 3 opens with a flashback to 1897, when Agatha has sacrificed herself to save Mina back in the cellar of the nunnery, and you kind of find out a bit what happens there. Obviously he bites her and Mina escapes. It then kind of moves to modern times, where Dracula's back on that beach, and he kind of bites the security guard, takes the gun and kind of takes control of the situation, and he runs off to a modern house, where he bites, like I suppose they're supposed to be like chavs or whatever. They live in quite a rundown house and stuff, and he bites this kind of violent drunk person and locks him in a fridge, and he's fascinated by the technology, and he thinks that, obviously compared to what he lived in, I suppose he thinks it's absolute luxury, which is maybe perhaps a point. The woman asks him, you know, loads of questions, the woman who's living there, and one of the things he says about is, because she says, do you have a reflection? And he says, yes, I do have a reflection, and he sees his reflection in a mirror, and he's quite disgusted by it, because what he says is, unlike the rest of them, he sees what's really there in the reflection, and obviously a decrepit, however old, 500-year-old man is not a pleasant sight indeed, is it? Zoe comes in the house. Zoe is Agatha's descendant, so she looks like him anyway. He takes her to a dream state and he bites her, but that obviously has an effect on him, because the blood is infected, because she has cancer, and yeah, so he's then taken to because he drops down with that, he's taken to the facility, where he sees actually a picture of Jonathan Harker, which he finds is odd, but obviously the facility was named after him, because Mina got away and set up that facility in his name to kind of one day find Dracula again. He then meets Lucy, who is kind of dating one of the people there, who is, oh god, I can't remember his name. Anyway, she's dating him, and he gets to know her, and she's kind of his next victim, because she's very carefree, and she's not scared of death or anything like that, and she lives for, you know, pleasure and likes. She's quite a hedonist and quite a kind of modern-y person. He then goes down to over the wreck of the Demeter, with what happened, how he got woken up, and that's because some person had opened the box and he'd bit their finger. Hang on, this is right, that's gone weird. So also they're obviously doing tests on him, and Zoe comes to take his blood, which is quite a thing. And he says to her, only in the blood can truth be found. And he's kind of giving her a message there, if you like. His lawyer then turns up, who happens to be called Frank Renfeld. And actually, the other irony with that is that Renfeld works for the same company that Jonathan Harker worked for. So as he's being released, because he has to, because of his human rights and whatnot, he sends Zoe an email which explains blood is lives again. So in the end, she drinks the blood sample. Now, whilst all this is going on, Renfeld gets Dracula all sorts of different people to feast on and to learn different skills and knowledge and all of that. And Zoe realises now she's connected to Agatha. All of her memories that were in Dracula come to her, and also she discovers like many things about Dracula. Now this could be kind of compared to the hypnotism that Van Helsing did to Lucy back in Bram Stoker's thing, you know, that kind of living through Dracula's mind and that. Yeah, so he gets closer to Lucy, Dracula does, and then she kind of comes to an end as well after he's let her listen to the trapped dead souls, if you like, and he warns her that obviously it's best to not get cremated because you're kind of sort of conscious even though you're dead. Obviously Lucy is cremated, and she's quite aware of this, and she rises. So Zoe and a connection with Agatha does help her come to some revelations and conclusions, and yeah, so also Lucy turns up at the house, well, the flat, while they're there, and it's Jack who ends her suffering. She was in love until death is why you find out Dracula was kind of appealed to her, and that's yeah, it's kind of his act of kindness allowing her to be killed as well. So what happens then is Agatha opens the window and brings in the sunlight, and Dracula obviously rolls about in fear and whatnot, but he doesn't die. Now he's very surprised by this, obviously Agatha aren't, and ultimately you find out that all these rules and all these customs and stuff are just complete nonsense, that he's just got used to believing them, and it suited him to believe them. It was his own fears, if you like. And then you find out that ultimately he's obviously quite scared of death, and she tells him he'll be kind of free in the sun, and that's what he's scared of, people seeing him as he is and him seeing him as he is. So he takes a last look in the sun, which he obviously has really missed, and he drinks Zoe's / Agatha's infected blood, and then they kind of go to a dream state of where they're having hanky-panky to kind of make their ending pleasurable and fine, and that's when it ends. Yeah, this episode I think is brilliant. Obviously not so much, it's a lot of it's come from its own kind of idea and Mark Gatiss's dark ideas and stuff, but to get some sort of conclusion of what motivates Dracula, why he's scared of things, what particular things he's convinced himself of, because none of these things can harm him and affect him, and it gets to explaining a lot of his own personal feelings, and that maybe he doesn't want to be living on forever and ever, and it's no fun. That's why he's so scared of the light and the cross and the end. So yeah, that's kind of the sum up of that episode, which I think is what I love it. I think it's one of the best Dracula things I've been lucky enough to see, really. So, fragrances. So yeah, how would I scent Lucy? I think she's obviously one of the main people in this one, and I think because she's so carefree and kind of also bold, if you like, very confident, very kind of outgoing, and everyone kind of loves her, although she is quite depressed. I mean, I didn't go too much into it, by her beauty, and that's kind of, she feels she's always judged on it. But anyway, what fragrance I picked for her is Mugler's Alien, the original. Now, the original was a big, bold statement maker. You couldn't miss it. It was perhaps for people with a bit more confidence, as it's, you know, it's quite bold. That dark jasmine, the cashmere and the musks is a really kind of big one that, you know, announces yourself. And she's also a little bit, obviously, with her being so carefree and beautiful and whatever, she plays on that. She's quite seductive and quite, you know, happy to mix with anyone and that, and it's quite easy to see why Dracula was kind of a great draw for her. Even the thought of knowing she'll die but kind of living forever kind of thing, it's kind of perfect. They're both kind of perfect for each other in that sense, weren't they? Now for Dracula in this one, it is as he's moving towards his end, and there is a kind of a love and a bond with Agatha, and I think he gave her the way of understanding him to be the one to release him from his everlasting kind of nothingness existence. So yeah, what I've gone for Dracula is Bois d'Argent from Dior, and this is because it is a piece. It's been in the clouds above, isn't it? It's that silver, it's that calm wood, that fresh green smell, the smell you probably have as everything comes to a nice peaceful close. And obviously the silver iris going through it gives it that almost heading towards the light, if you like, which is of course symbolic because it was the light that released him for everything. Even though it didn't kill him, it just showed he's been, you know, he's an idiot. What a waste of life. He could have walked about in the daytime, etc. And I just think, yeah, that works perfectly. And that concludes it. I don't need to do any more scenting or any more talk. So in conclusion, I mean, this is not every Dracula story ever, and there's not too much detail in it. It's not a comprehensive, you know, documentary style history. It's just a brief overview of these kind of three stories and the kind of development of who he is and his place in popular culture, if you like, starting from him just being some sort of dashing lord. And I suppose a little bit of it would have been more perhaps inspired by Satan when they were writing the first Byron and the other fellow were writing about it, because Satan evil is supposed to be seductive and charming and exciting, and they kind of personified that into a vampire who then, you know, through various incarnations, they weren't the only stories. Obviously Bram Stoker's is the most famous one, and then for us of our kind of generation, that was made into a film, which kind of goes off on one in all different directions. again, it created that kind of who he is. What it, I suppose, took away from kind of the original idea is that he's dead and he can't feel love and things like that. But the new version very much draws them all together, and it's about Dracula himself, who he is, what motivates him, the different stages he went through, and ultimately his quest for some peace, and perhaps even not to feel alone, which is why he drinks the bloods of these people he likes, and that because he has all their memories and he carries them around forever with him. So in a way, it's a good conclusion for this, and we'll see where it goes in the future. Hopefully no more crap like Twilight and nonsense like that, and obviously there's lots of vampire things, and somehow this relationship to werewolves and stuff is all like, just try and stick, there's so much in the original concept and idea that in itself is interesting enough, isn't it? But yeah, what about you? Who's your kind of Dracula that you associate with? I mean, you could go back to the Hammers and Christopher Lee and all of that, or somebody else, or maybe you're a more modern kind of person who loves nonsense like Twilight and stuff. Alright, I'm not going to make this long. Thanks for watching. It's Halloween, innit? So yeah, it's very long, but it was something I wanted to do, lots of research and do something special for it. Alright folks, thanks, bye.